That morning, Robert's entire world was about to crumble, but he didn't know it yet. The 68-year-old retired construction worker had woken up at 6 a.m. like always, made his coffee, and sat on his porch in their modest Chicago suburb home. For 3 months since Margaret's death, his neighbor Tom had been keeping him company every morning. 30 years of being neighbors, 30 years of friendship, or so Robert thought. But wait. Before we dive deeper into this shocking betrayal, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more unbelievable true stories that will leave you questioning everything about trust and friendship. The mailman Jake arrived earlier than usual that morning, and the look on his face when he handed Robert the yellow envelope was strange, like he wanted to say something but couldn't bring himself to do it. Robert took the envelope and Jake hurried away, almost like he was running from something. The envelope was from the county court. Robert's hands started trembling. During Margaret's illness, he'd signed many documents, but what could the court want with him? When he opened it, he couldn't believe his eyes. It was an eviction notice. He had 30 days to leave his home of 35 years. At the bottom of the document, listed as the property owner, was Tom Harrison, his neighbor Tom's full name. Robert's knees went weak, and he collapsed into his porch chair. Just then, Tom walked through the garden gate with his usual cheerfulness, carrying 2 cups of coffee, like every morning. When he saw Robert's face, he paused for just a moment, but then approached with that same friendly smile that Robert had trusted for 3 decades. Robert held out the paper toward Tom. His voice was shaking, but this time not from age, from pure rage. Tom glanced at the paper and shrugged his shoulders like they were discussing the weather. He reminded Robert about how he'd helped during Margaret's illness, paid the hospital bills, bought the medications. Robert knew all this, of course. Tom had been their savior during those dark days. But what Tom said next made Robert's blood freeze in his veins. Tom explained that in exchange for all that help, he'd put Robert's house up as collateral, had him sign papers, legal documents. After Margaret's death, knowing Robert couldn't pay back the debt, he'd transferred the house to his name. Legally, Robert's signature was on everything. Robert remembered signing those papers. Margaret had been fighting for her life in the hospital when Tom came with what he said were insurance forms. Robert had signed without reading because he trusted. He'd trusted his friend of 30 years. Tom revealed something else. It wasn't just the house. The $87,000 in Robert's retirement account now belonged to Tom too, also documented. Also legal. Everything Robert had worked for now had Tom's name attached to it. He'd opened joint accounts without Robert even realizing. Robert tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't hold him. He'd worked construction for 45 years, bent his back, filled his lungs with dust, saved every penny. He and Margaret had dreamed of a comfortable retirement. Now Margaret was gone, and apparently he had nothing left. Tom continued explaining casually, like he was discussing a business deal. He'd been planning this for years. Margaret's illness had just accelerated things. After Robert's son Danny died in Afghanistan, Tom knew Robert and Margaret would be completely alone. No family, no one to check on them, no one to ask questions. Tears started rolling down Robert's weathered face. This wasn't an old man crying. No, his eyes were burning because the rage and betrayal inside him was so massive, it was overflowing through his eyes. Tom remained calm, like they were discussing a routine transaction. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn that nobody saw coming. The neighbors passing by saw Robert on his porch talking to Tom. Everyone loved Tom in the neighborhood. Helpful Tom, friendly Tom, the guy who helped everyone. Who would believe Robert? Tom pulled out his phone and showed Robert something that made the old man's heart skip several beats. It was a video from 3 years ago, showing Robert seemingly signing documents while completely coherent and aware. What the video didn't show was that Tom had drugged Robert's coffee that day. The old man had been barely conscious, but Tom had propped him up to make it look legitimate. Robert's mind raced back to that day. He'd felt unusually tired, had blamed it on the stress of Margaret's diagnosis. Now it all made sense. The dizziness, the confusion, the gaps in his memory from that afternoon. Tom leaned in closer, and his voice dropped to a whisper. He told Robert that this wasn't the first time he'd done this. There had been others in the neighborhood. Mrs. Chen from 2 blocks over, who'd supposedly moved to live with her daughter. Mr. Williams, who'd apparently gone to a nursing home suddenly. All of them had trusted Tom, and all of them had lost everything. Robert's hands gripped the arms of his chair so tightly, his knuckles turned white. His breathing became labored. Tom noticed and actually had the audacity to ask if Robert needed his heart medication. The same medication Tom had been picking up from the pharmacy for months. Robert suddenly wondered what else Tom might have been doing with those pills. The realization hit Robert like a sledgehammer. During Margaret's final weeks, Tom had insisted on helping with her medications too. He'd organized them in those daily pill containers, said it would make things easier. Margaret had gotten worse so quickly after that. The doctors had said it was normal progression. But what if? Robert looked up at Tom with horror in his eyes. Tom must have seen the recognition dawning, because his friendly mask slipped for just a second, and Robert saw something cold and calculating underneath. Then the smile returned, and Tom patted Robert on the shoulder like they were still old friends. Tom stood up to leave, mentioning casually that Robert should probably start packing. Maybe the senior shelter downtown would have space, he suggested with mock concern. As he walked away, he turned back and reminded Robert that nobody would believe him. A confused old man making wild accusations against the neighborhood's most trusted resident. The police would think it was dementia. Robert sat frozen on his porch for hours after Tom left. His coffee had gone cold, but he didn't dare drink it anyway, not anymore. As the sun climbed higher, he noticed something strange. Other neighbors were avoiding eye contact when they walked by. Did they know? Were they all in on it somehow, or were they just uncomfortable witnessing an old man's breakdown? That afternoon, Robert tried calling his lawyer, but the number had been disconnected. He tried calling the police, but when he mentioned Tom Harrison's name, the officer on the phone suddenly said they couldn't help with civil matters and hung up. It was like Tom had connections everywhere. Robert shuffled inside and began going through his papers, desperate to find something, anything that could help him. In Margaret's jewelry box, hidden under the felt lining, he found something that made his heart race. It was a small USB drive with a sticky note in Margaret's shaky handwriting that said, "For Robert, Tom is not who you think." With trembling fingers, Robert plugged the drive into their old computer. Margaret had been recording. Somehow, even in her illness, she'd been suspicious. The first file was dated 3 months before her death. Margaret's weak voice filled the room, and Robert had to sit down as he listened. She'd overheard Tom on the phone, talking about the old construction worker and how much his retirement was worth. She'd seen him going through their mail when he thought no one was watching. She'd noticed him taking photos of their documents when he supposedly was helping with paperwork. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Margaret had hired a private investigator with the last of her personal savings. The investigator had discovered that Tom Harrison wasn't even his real name. He was actually Timothy Hoffman, a con artist who'd been moving from state to state for decades, targeting elderly couples with no close family. The investigation revealed that Tom had at least 12 victims across 5 states. Each time he'd spent years building trust, becoming indispensable, and then striking when the victims were most vulnerable. He had a partner too, someone who worked at the county courthouse, helping him file fraudulent documents and making everything appear legal. Margaret's voice on the recording grew weaker as she explained that she'd tried to warn Robert, but Tom had been medicating her too heavily. She'd hidden the USB drive on one of her few clear days, hoping Robert would find it. Her last words on the recording were, "I love you, Bobby. Fight him. Don't let him win." Robert sat in the darkness of their bedroom, clutching the USB drive. Margaret had known. Even dying, she'd been trying to protect him. The tears came freely now, not from despair but from a mixture of grief and determination. But wait, there's something even more sinister about to unfold. The next morning, Robert woke up to find Tom in his kitchen, making coffee like nothing had happened. Tom explained that he still had keys, of course, since he'd been helping for so long. The threat was implicit. Tom could come and go as he pleased. Tom mentioned casually that Robert looked tired, maybe he should see a doctor. The way he said it made Robert's skin crawl. It wasn't concern, it was a threat. Tom pulled out a small bottle of pills, saying they were Robert's heart medication, that he should take them. Robert recognized the bottle, but something about Tom's insistence made him suspicious. Robert pretended to take the pill but palmed it instead. After Tom left, satisfied that Robert was properly subdued, Robert took the pill to his friend Eddie, who worked at a pharmacy downtown. Eddie's face went pale when he analyzed it. It wasn't heart medication at all. It was a powerful sedative mixed with something else, something that would make Robert extremely compliant and confused. Eddie wanted to call the police immediately, but Robert stopped him. He knew Tom had connections. He needed more proof, and he needed to be smart about this. Eddie gave him some real heart medication and warned him to be careful. Tom was dangerous, more dangerous than Robert had ever imagined. That night, Robert couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made him think Tom was coming back. At 3 a.m., he heard footsteps on his porch. Through the window, he saw Tom with another man, someone he didn't recognize. They were discussing something in hushed tones, and Robert caught fragments of their conversation about making it look natural, and the old man won't last much longer. Robert recorded everything on his phone, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. The two men tried the door, but Robert had barricaded it with furniture. They gave up after a few minutes, probably not wanting to make too much noise and alert the neighbors. The next day, Robert went to the FBI office downtown. The local police might be compromised, but surely the FBI would listen. The agent he spoke to, Agent Sarah Mills, took him seriously when he showed her Margaret's USB drive and his phone recording from the night before. Agent Mills revealed something that made Robert's situation even more critical. They'd been tracking Timothy Hoffman, aka Tom Harrison, for 3 years. He was part of a larger crime ring that targeted elderly Americans, stealing billions in retirement savings. But they'd never been able to catch him in the act. Robert's evidence was exactly what they needed. But here's where things get even more intense. Agent Mills warned Robert that he was in immediate danger. If Tom suspected that Robert had gone to the authorities, he wouldn't hesitate to make Robert disappear like his other victims. They needed to act fast, but they also needed Tom to make one more move to ensure they could arrest not just him, but his entire network. Agent Mills proposed a plan. Robert would pretend to give in, act confused and defeated. They would wire him up and have agents nearby. When Tom came to finish whatever he was planning, They would have everything they needed to take down the entire operation. Robert agreed, though his every instinct screamed against it. He returned home to find Tom waiting on his porch, that fake, concerned expression plastered on his face. Tom had brought more medication and insisted Robert take it in front of him this time. Robert took the pills, but Agent Mills had given him something to counteract the effects. He had to act drowsy and compliant while staying alert enough to survive whatever came next. Tom seemed satisfied and helped Robert inside, guiding him to the couch. Tom pulled out more documents, explaining that Robert needed to sign over his Social Security benefits too. Just to make things easier, he said. Robert's hand shook as he pretended to struggle with the pen. Tom was impatient, but trying to maintain his caring facade. That's when Tom made his mistake. He started bragging, thinking Robert was too drugged to remember. He talked about how easy it had been to fool everyone, how Margaret had actually figured it out, but it was too late. He admitted to increasing her medication doses, hastening her decline. Robert's heart broke all over again, but he forced himself to remain seemingly unconscious. Tom described his other victims in detail, laughing about how trusting elderly people were. He mentioned his partner at the courthouse, Judge Coleman, who'd been helping him for years in exchange for a cut of the profits. He even talked about his next target, the Johnsons 3 houses down. But Tom wasn't done. He pulled out a syringe, explaining to the seemingly unconscious Robert that this was a special cocktail. It would cause a massive heart attack within hours, completely untraceable. Just another old man whose heart gave out from the stress of losing his wife. Tom had done this before, many times. Just as Tom was about to inject Robert, the front door burst open. FBI agents flooded in, guns drawn. Tom tried to run but was tackled in the kitchen. The syringe fell from his hand, its contents spilling on the floor. Later analysis would show it contained a lethal dose of potassium chloride mixed with other drugs. The arrest was chaotic. Tom screamed that Robert had set him up, that it was all a misunderstanding. But the FBI had recorded everything. They had Tom's confession, the attempted murder on tape, and years of evidence from Margaret's investigation. But the story doesn't end with Tom's arrest. This is where it gets even more shocking. The FBI raid on Tom's house revealed a horror show of evidence. They found detailed files on over 40 victims across 7 states. Photo albums documenting his infiltration into their lives, their medical records, financial statements, and chillingly, obituaries he'd collected like trophies. In his basement, they found a safe containing $3.2 million in cash and gold, all stolen from his victims. They also found IDs and credit cards belonging to people who'd supposedly moved away or died. Some of these people were still listed as missing. Robert was called to identify some items, and what he saw there shattered him completely. Among Tom's possessions were things Robert recognized from other neighbors who'd moved away suddenly over the years. Mrs. Patterson's wedding ring, Mr. Kumar's war medals, little mementos Tom had kept from each victim. The trial was a media sensation. Tom, or rather Timothy Hoffman, was linked to at least 15 deaths and dozens of fraud cases. Judge Coleman was arrested too, along with 6 other accomplices, including a doctor who'd been providing the drugs and a funeral home director who'd been helping cover up suspicious deaths. Robert testified, his voice strong despite his age. He told the court about Margaret's final message, about how she'd fought to expose Tom even while dying. The courtroom was silent as he played Margaret's recordings, her weak but determined voice filling the space. Tom was sentenced to life without parole on multiple counts of murder, attempted murder, fraud, and elder abuse. His accomplices received sentences ranging from 20 to 40 years. The FBI was able to recover some of the stolen money, though most victims or their families would never see full restitution. Robert got his house back, but it felt empty without Margaret. The $87,000 from his retirement account was recovered, along with an additional $50,000 that Tom had stolen without Robert even knowing. But no amount of money could bring back Margaret or undo what had been done. The neighborhood struggled to process what had happened. People who'd trusted Tom, who'd let him into their homes, felt violated and scared. How could they have been so blind? How could someone fake being a good person for so long? Robert became something of a reluctant hero in the elder community. He started speaking at senior centers, warning about elder fraud and abuse. He'd tell them about Tom, about the red flags he'd missed, about the importance of staying vigilant even with people you think you know. But the trauma never fully left him. Robert would wake up at night, thinking he heard Tom's footsteps on his porch. He couldn't drink coffee anymore without wondering if it was poisoned. He double-checked every lock, every window, every night. 6 months after the trial, Robert received a letter. It was from another one of Tom's victims, an elderly woman from Iowa, whose husband had died under suspicious circumstances 5 years earlier. She thanked Robert for his courage, for finally stopping Tom. Her letter ended with a line that haunted Robert. "You saved lives, Mr. Wilson. My husband would have been proud." Robert started connecting with other victims and their families. They formed a support group, meeting monthly to share their experiences and heal together. It turned out Tom had destroyed so many lives, had left so many elderly people destitute or dead. 1 year after Tom's arrest, Robert was visited by Agent Mills. She had news. The investigation had expanded internationally. Tom had been part of a massive criminal network targeting elderly people across the world. The arrests continued, with over 50 people eventually charged in connection with the scheme. Agent Mills also brought something else. A box of Margaret's things that had been found in Tom's possession. Among them was Margaret's diary, which Tom had stolen. Reading it, Robert discovered that Margaret had suspected Tom even earlier than the recording showed. She'd been trying to protect Robert for over a year, even as her own health failed. The diary entries were heartbreaking. Margaret wrote about her fear that Tom was poisoning her, about her desperation to warn Robert, about her love for her husband and her determination to save him even if she couldn't save herself. The final entry, written in a shaky hand, simply said, "Bobby will figure it out. He's stronger than Tom thinks. My Bobby will win." Robert sits on his porch now, the same porch where his world fell apart that morning. He's 70 now, still alone but not defeated. He keeps Margaret's picture next to him, talks to her sometimes. He tells her about the people he's helped, about the crimes he's helped prevent. The neighborhood has new faces now. Young families who don't know the full story of what happened here. Sometimes they wave at the old man on his porch, not knowing he's the one who exposed one of the largest elder fraud rings in American history. Tom still writes to Robert from prison occasionally. The letters are full of manipulation and fake remorse, trying to work his con even from behind bars. Robert doesn't read them anymore. He gives them straight to the FBI, who are still using them to understand the psychology of elder abuse predators. But there's one more twist to this story that emerged just recently. During a prison interview for a documentary about elder fraud, Tom let something slip. He mentioned that he'd learned everything from his mentor, someone he called the Shepherd. This person was supposedly still out there, still running similar schemes, having taught dozens of people like Tom how to prey on the elderly. The FBI is now searching for the shepherd, and Robert has become an unofficial consultant on the case. His experience, his insight into how Tom operated, has become invaluable. Even in his 70s, Robert is still fighting, still protecting others from predators like Tom. Sometimes Robert wonders what would have happened if that mailman hadn't delivered that eviction notice. If Tom had been more patient, more careful, would Robert have ever discovered the truth? Would he have become just another obituary in Tom's collection? But then he remembers Margaret's words from that USB drive. Fight him. Don't let him win. And Robert knows that somehow, even from beyond, Margaret had made sure the truth came out. Their love, their partnership of 45 years, had been stronger than Tom's evil. The elderly in America lose billions to scams every year, but Robert's story has become a rallying cry for change. New laws have been passed, banks have implemented better protections, and adult protective services have received more funding. All because one old construction worker refused to give up, refused to let his neighbor's betrayal be the end of his story. Robert still lives in that house, the one he almost lost. Every morning he sits on his porch with his coffee, the coffee he makes himself and drinks without fear. He watches the sunrise and talks to Margaret's picture, telling her about his day, about the continued fight against elder abuse. The house is paid off now, really and truly his. The retirement money is secure, protected by new measures he's learned to put in place. But more than that, Robert has found a purpose in his pain. Every senior he helps protect, every scam he helps expose, is a victory not just for him, but for Margaret too. Tom took so much from Robert: his trust, his security, potentially his life, and possibly hastened Margaret's death. But Tom didn't take everything. He didn't take Robert's spirit, his determination, or his ability to turn trauma into purpose. As Robert often says in his talks at senior centers, they target us because they think we're weak, that we're easy marks. But we survived wars, recessions, and decades of hard labor. We raised families and built this country. We're not weak, we're just trusting. And maybe it's time we trusted ourselves more than we trust others. The story of Robert and Tom has become legendary in elder care circles. It's a cautionary tale, but also an inspiring one. It shows that it's never too late to fight back, never too late to seek justice, and never too late to protect others from the predators who walk among us with friendly smiles and helpful hands. And somewhere, in whatever afterlife exists, Margaret is watching over Robert, proud of her Bobby for winning the fight she started. Their love story didn't end with her death, or Tom's betrayal. It continued through Robert's courage, through his refusal to be a victim, through his transformation from prey to protector. This is the reality for too many elderly Americans. The Tom Harrisons of the world are out there, patient and cunning, waiting for vulnerability to exploit. But there are also Robert's fighters who refuse to go quietly, who refuse to let evil win. Every morning, when Robert sits on that porch, he's not just an old man drinking coffee. He's a survivor, a warrior, and a guardian. And as long as he has breath in his body, he'll keep fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. Because that's what Margaret would want. That's what love really means, protecting each other, even when one of you is gone. The investigation continues. The shepherd is still out there, and Robert, at 70 years old, is still on the case, still fighting, still proving that age is just a number when it comes to seeking justice. His story isn't over. In fact, in many ways, it's just beginning.